Hello everyone, welcome back to Whisper Tales channel. Before we get started, comment below where you are from and what time you are watching. And did you know that 97% of you guys watching aren't subscribed yet? So make sure to subscribe and like. Alright, let's get into it. Story 1. The Frozen Watcher of Lac Noir. In the winter of 1987, Margot Beliveau moved into a cabin on the shores of Lac Noir in Northern Quebec. She was a documentary photographer seeking solitude after a painful divorce, and the isolation of the frozen lake seemed like the perfect remedy for her wounded spirit. The cabin belonged to her uncle Henri, who had died the previous autumn. He'd left it to her in his will, along with a single photograph and a note that read, "Don't look at the lake after midnight." Margot laughed when she first read it. Henri had always been eccentric, prone to superstitions and old wives' tales. She hung the photograph on the cabin wall without much thought. It showed a figure standing on the frozen lake, distant and blurred, barely visible through what appeared to be a snowstorm. For the first week, Margot fell into a comfortable routine. She would photograph the winter landscape during the day, edit her work in the evening, and fall asleep to the sound of ice shifting on the lake. The nights were utterly silent except for that occasional groaning of the frozen surface. On the 8th night, Margot woke at 12:47 a.m. Something had disturbed her sleep, though she couldn't identify what. She lay in bed, listening. The cabin was still. The lake was quiet. Then she heard it. A soft tapping on the window. She told herself it was ice falling from the roof. But the tapping came again, more insistent this time. 3 deliberate knocks. Margot rose from bed and approached the window. The curtains were drawn. She reached for them, then remembered her uncle's note. "Don't look at the lake after midnight." The tapping stopped. She returned to bed but couldn't sleep. Every few minutes the tapping would resume, always 3 knocks, always on a different window. It circled the cabin slowly, methodically. Margot pulled the covers over her head like a child and waited for dawn. In the morning she examined the snow around the cabin. There were no footprints, no marks of any kind. The snow was pristine and undisturbed. That night she forced herself to stay awake. She sat in the living room with all the lights on, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. At midnight exactly, the tapping began again. This time Margot decided to break her uncle's rule. She needed to know what was out there. She approached the window facing the lake and pulled back the curtain. A figure stood on the ice, perhaps 50 yards from shore. It was humanoid, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin. It stood perfectly still, facing the cabin. Even at this distance, Margot could see that it wore no winter clothes, just what appeared to be a pale, tattered garment that might have once been a nightgown. The figure raised one arm slowly and knocked 3 times on the air in front of it. The tapping sounded on Margot's window in perfect synchronization. Margot dropped the curtain and stumbled backward. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She grabbed her car keys and ran for the door, ready to flee into the night. But when she threw open the door, the figure was standing on her porch. Up close, Margot could see it clearly. The face was blue-white with frostbite, the eyes frozen solid into milky orbs. Long black hair hung in frozen strands around a face that might have been beautiful once. The mouth hung open in a silent scream, revealing a throat that had been torn out. Margot slammed the door and locked it. She pushed furniture against it, barricading herself inside. The tapping resumed, moving from window to window, door to door. It continued until sunrise. When dawn finally broke, Margot packed her belongings and prepared to leave. But before she did, she looked again at the photograph her uncle had left her. She studied the blurred figure in the snowstorm more carefully this time. With growing horror, She realized the figure in the photograph was wearing the same clothes she had put on last night. The same blue sweater, the same gray pants. The photograph showed her, standing on the ice, frozen and dead. She looked at the date stamped on the back of the photo. February 14th, 1988. 3 months in the future. Margot fled the cabin that morning and never returned. She told her family the isolation was too much for her. She never mentioned the figure on the ice. 3 months later, on Valentine's Day, 1988, Margot's cousin Thomas went to check on the cabin. He found it empty and locked. But standing on the frozen lake, clearly visible in the moonlight, was a figure in a blue sweater and gray pants. He took a photograph to show the police. Margot Beliveau was never seen again. The cabin remains empty to this day. And sometimes, in the deep winter, people driving past Lac Noir report seeing a figure standing on the ice, slowly making its way towards the shore as if searching for something. Story 2. The Whispering Ward of St. Cecilia's. Dr. Nathaniel Cross accepted the position at St. Cecilia's Hospital in Halifax with enthusiasm. It was 1993, and the old psychiatric facility was being modernized. As the new director of the long-term care ward, Nathaniel would oversee the transition, ensuring patients received the best possible treatment with the latest therapeutic approaches. St. Cecilia's had operated since 1892, and the building showed its age. The long-term care ward occupied the 4th floor of the original structure, a Victorian nightmare of long corridors and high ceilings. The hospital board had wanted to relocate the patients, but Nathaniel argued they shouldn't be displaced during renovations. He would regret that decision. The ward housed 17 patients, most of whom had been institutionalized for decades. They suffered from various conditions: schizophrenia, catatonia, severe depression. Nathaniel learned their names and histories, determined to see each as an individual rather than a diagnosis. One patient particularly intrigued him. Her name was Vera Thornhill, and she had been at St. Cecilia's since 1952. Now in her 70s, Vera spent her days sitting by the window in the common room, whispering continuously to herself. The previous director's notes indicated she had been doing this for 41 years, without pause. Nathaniel approached her one afternoon. "Hello, Vera. I'm Dr. Cross. How are you feeling today?" Vera continued whispering, her lips moving rapidly. Nathaniel leaned closer, trying to catch the words. 23 in the walls, 17 in the floors, 9 in the ceiling, 47 in the basement, 12 in the... She was counting. Just counting, over and over. "What are you counting, Vera?" Nathaniel asked gently. For the first time in 41 years, Vera stopped whispering. She turned to look at Nathaniel with clear, lucid eyes. "The ones who never left," she said. Then she resumed her counting. Nathaniel was disturbed but fascinated. He began researching St. Cecilia's history. The hospital had been progressive for its time, but he found troubling gaps in the records. Patient logs from 1918 to 1923 were missing entirely. Death certificates from the 1930s showed unusual patterns, clusters of fatalities attributed to sudden cardiac failure or unexplained decline. He brought his concerns to the hospital administrator, Judith Mercer. She dismissed them politely. "Old institutions have messy records, Dr. Cross. People died. That's unfortunate, but not sinister. I'd prefer you focus on your current patients rather than ghosts from the past." But Nathaniel couldn't let it go. He started staying late, reading through boxes of old files stored in the basement. He found patient photographs from the 1920s, faces staring at the camera with hollow expressions. He found doctors' journals describing experimental treatments, prolonged ice baths, insulin shock therapy, surgical procedures performed without proper consent. And he found a memoir written by a nurse named Adelaide Finch, dated 1951. She described hearing whispers in the walls of the fourth floor, voices calling out in pain and confusion. She wrote about patients who claimed to see figures standing at the foot of their beds at night, figures in old-fashioned hospital gowns. The memoir ended abruptly, with a note from the hospital director stating that Nurse Finch had been dismissed for nervous hysteria and delusions. 1 week after reading Adelaide's memoir, Nathaniel began hearing the whispers himself. It started during night rounds. He would walk the fourth-floor corridor, checking on sleeping patients, and hear soft voices just below the threshold of comprehension. At first he thought it was pipes or ventilation. But the whispers had rhythm and cadence. They were speaking. He mentioned it to the night nurse, Claudette Rousseau. She gave him a strange look. "You hear them too?" she asked. "You've heard them?" Claudette nodded slowly. "Since I started working here 5 years ago. Sometimes they're louder than others. I've learned to ignore them." "What do they say?" "I've never been able to tell. And honestly, Dr. Cross, I don't want to know." But Nathaniel did want to know. He began recording the whispers on a small tape recorder during his night rounds. He filled tape after tape with the sounds, then spent his evenings playing them back at different speeds, trying to isolate individual voices. On the third week, he succeeded. The whispers, when slowed down and amplified, were voices. Dozens of voices. Hundreds, perhaps. They were saying names, saying them over and over. Leonard Pritchard, Susanna Wells, Dominic Fournier, Catherine Chang. The list went on and on. Nathaniel cross-referenced the names with historical records. Every single one had been a patient at St. Cecilia's. Every single one had died there between 1918 and 1952. He confronted Judith Mercer with his findings. She listened patiently, then leaned back in her chair. "Dr. Cross, I'm going to be direct with you. You're not the first director we've had who's become obsessed with this. 3 of your predecessors went down the same path. They all had to be replaced. I'm giving you a choice. Drop this matter entirely and continue your excellent work with the current patients, or take a medical leave to address what appears to be the onset of a stress-related condition." Nathaniel chose to drop it. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more insistent. He began to distinguish individual voices in the chorus. A young man with a Boston accent, an elderly woman speaking French, a child who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. The other patients noticed changes too. Several who had been stable for years began experiencing acute episodes. They spoke of seeing visitors in their rooms at night, visitors who stood silently at the foot of the bed and stared. One patient, Marcus DeWitt, became so agitated he had to be sedated. He kept screaming that the walls were full of people trying to get out. Then Vera stopped counting. Nathaniel found her in the common room, still sitting by her window, but silent for the first time in decades. He approached cautiously. "Vera, are you all right?" She turned to him with those clear, lucid eyes. "I was counting them," she said, "keeping track. As long as I counted, they stayed where they were. But I'm tired, Dr. Cross. I've been counting for so long, I think I'd like to rest now." "Vera, who were you counting?" She smiled sadly. "The ones who died badly. The ones who died in pain, in confusion, in restraints. The ones who died from the treatments that were supposed to help them. I've been counting them for 41 years, keeping them in the walls, in the floors, in the ceiling. But there are too many, and I'm so tired." The next morning, Vera Thornhill was found dead in her bed, apparently from natural causes. She looked peaceful. That night, the fourth floor erupted into chaos. Patients woke screaming. Call lights blazed all at once. Nathaniel ran from room to room trying to calm people, but they were all seeing the same thing. Figures emerging from the walls, from the floors, from the ceiling. Dozens of figures in old hospital gowns, their faces hollow with suffering, their hands reaching out. The whispers became a roar. Claudette grabbed Nathaniel's arm. "We need to evacuate, now." They began moving patients out, but the elevators malfunctioned. The stairwell doors wouldn't open. They were trapped on the 4th floor with 17 panicked patients and an army of the dead that only some of them could see. Nathaniel understood then what Vera had been doing. She had been keeping them contained through the force of her will, through 41 years of endless counting. And now that will was gone. The figures surrounded them, pressing closer. Nathaniel could feel their cold presence, could hear them whispering their names, demanding to be remembered, demanding acknowledgement of what had been done to them. In desperation, he did the only thing he could think of. He began to count. 1 in the walls, 2 in the walls, 3 in the walls. The figures stopped advancing. 4 in the walls, 5 in the walls. They began to fade slightly, their forms becoming translucent. Nathaniel kept counting. He counted all night. And when morning came and the doors finally opened, he was still counting. The hospital board decided to close the 4th floor permanently. The patients were relocated. Nathaniel was offered a generous severance package and a strong recommendation that he seek therapy. But sometimes, late at night, Nathaniel Cross still finds himself counting. He counts the ones who died badly, the ones who died in pain. He counts them to keep them contained, to keep them from spilling out into the world. He has been counting for 3 years now. He wonders how long Vera managed to count. 41 years seemed impossible. But he's beginning to understand that impossible doesn't matter when you have no other choice. Story 3. The Roadside Confessor of Highway 11. Trevor Sanderson drove transport trucks for Northland Freight, running the long haul between Thunder Bay and Cochrane. In 15 years on Highway 11, he thought he'd seen everything the Northern Ontario wilderness could throw at him. Whiteouts, black ice, moose crossings, even the northern lights dancing overhead like God's own light show. But he'd never seen the Roadside Confessor until that October night in 1999. Trevor was running behind schedule thanks to a delay at the depot. It was past midnight when he finally hit the long stretch between Hearst and Smooth Rock Falls. The highway was empty, just his headlights cutting through the darkness and the endless wall of trees on either side. That's when he saw the figure standing beside the road. It was a priest, clearly visible in his black cassock and white collar, holding out his thumb in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. Trevor's first instinct was to keep driving. You don't pick up hitchhikers on lonely highways in the middle of the night, especially not ones dressed as clergy. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the fact that the priest appeared to be elderly, or maybe it was the sheer strangeness of seeing anyone out here at this hour. Trevor pulled over. The priest opened the passenger door and climbed in with surprising agility for his apparent age. Up close, Trevor could see he was perhaps 70, with a lined face and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Thank you, my son," the priest said. "It's a cold night to be standing outside." "What were you doing out there, Father? Your car break down?" "Something like that." The priest settled into his seat. "I'm Father Wilhelm Kessler. Appreciate the ride." "Trevor Sanderson, where are you headed?" "North. I'll tell you when to stop." They drove in silence for a while. Trevor kept glancing at his passenger, trying to place what felt wrong about the situation. The priest's clothing, he realized, looked old-fashioned. Not vintage, but genuinely old, as if it had been made decades ago and carefully preserved. "So what brings you out to this stretch of nowhere, Father?" Father Kessler turned to look at him. "I could ask you the same question, Trevor, but I think I know the answer. You're running from something, aren't you? Something you did." Trevor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't know what you mean. 3 years ago, the accident in Kenora, the child on the bicycle. Trevor's blood went cold. He hadn't thought about that night in months, hadn't let himself think about it. I didn't see her, he whispered. It was dark. She came out of nowhere. I stopped. I called 911. I did everything right. Except tell the truth, Father Kessler said gently. You told the police you were going the speed limit, but you weren't. You were tired, running late, pushing too hard. You were going 60 in a 30 zone. How do you... The girl's name was Sophia Reimer. She was 9 years old. She died in the hospital 3 days later. Her mother never recovered from the grief. She took her own life last year. Did you know that? Trevor couldn't speak. Tears blurred his vision. Would you like to confess? Father Kessler asked. And suddenly, Trevor wanted nothing more. He wanted to unburden himself of the guilt he'd been carrying, the knowledge that his lie had deprived a family of justice, of closure. He wanted absolution. He began to talk. He told Father Kessler everything, not just about Sophia Reimer, but about other sins, other shortcuts, other lies. He talked about cheating on his wife, about the money he'd skimmed from expense reports, about the time he'd let a colleague take the fall for his mistake. The words poured out of him in a torrent. And Father Kessler listened, nodding occasionally, his expression compassionate and understanding. When Trevor finally finished, Father Kessler was silent for a long moment. Do you seek forgiveness, my son? Yes, Trevor said. God, yes, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. Then I have something to tell you, Trevor. I am not a priest. I was never ordained. I wear these clothes because they make people trust me, make them want to confess their sins. And I listen. I listen to everything. Trevor looked at his passenger. The kind eyes had changed. They were still human, but there was something ancient behind them. Something that had been listening to confessions for a very long time. What are you? Trevor asked. Pull over, Father Kessler said. Trevor found himself obeying, guiding the truck onto the shoulder. They were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by darkness and trees. Get out, Father Kessler said. Trevor climbed down from the cab. His passenger followed. In the glow of the truck's lights, Trevor could see that Father Kessler's cassock was stained with something dark. Blood, maybe. Old blood. I've been listening to confessions on this highway for 70 years, Father Kessler said. Do you know how many sins I've heard? How many terrible things people have done and hidden? I listen to them all. I collect them. And when someone confesses something truly unforgivable, something that has destroyed innocent lives, I give them a choice. What choice? Father Kessler pointed down the highway, back the way they'd come. You can walk back. It's 40 kilometers to the last town. If you make it by sunrise, you're free. Your sins are forgiven, washed clean. You get to start over. And if I don't make it, then I keep your confession, and you become part of the highway, just another unsolved disappearance. But your sins die with you. The people you've hurt get compensation, a feeling of peace, a sense that justice has been done, even if they don't know why. Trevor looked down the dark highway. 40 kilometers. He was in decent shape, but that was hours of walking through the cold October night. Why are you doing this? He asked. Because someone has to. Father Kessler's voice was infinitely sad. Someone has to listen. Someone has to balance the scales. I was a priest once, you know, a real one. I heard confessions in a small parish in Bavaria. But I listened to a man confess terrible crimes, and I kept his secrets because that's what the seal of confession demanded. And he killed again, and again, and I carried that guilt until it destroyed me. So now I listen, and I offer another path. Justice or mercy. The choice is yours. Trevor started walking. He walked through the cold night, his breath steaming in the air. He walked past kilometer after kilometer of dark forest, his legs burning, his lungs aching. He thought about Sophia Reimer. He thought about her mother. He thought about all the ways his cowardice had rippled outward, destroying lives. The sky began to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. Trevor could see buildings in the distance, the edge of a town. He was going to make it. But then he stopped walking. He stood in the middle of Highway 11 as the sun rose, and he thought about what forgiveness would mean. He would go back to his life, back to his wife, back to his job. He would continue living while Sophia Reimer remained dead, while her mother remained dead. He would be free of his guilt while they remained in the ground. Trevor turned around and walked back. Father Kessler was waiting where Trevor had left him, standing beside the transport truck. "I can't," Trevor said. "I don't deserve forgiveness. What I did, I have to carry it." Father Kessler studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. "That's the first time in 70 years someone has come back," he said. "The first time someone has chosen to carry their burden rather than be free of it." "What happens now?" "Now?" Father Kessler reached up and removed his collar. Beneath it, his throat was scarred, as if it had been cut long ago. "Now you take my place. Someone has to listen, Trevor. Someone has to offer the choice. I've been doing it since 1929, since I died on this highway carrying my own unbearable guilt. But if you're willing to carry yours, to use it to help others face theirs, then maybe I can finally rest." Trevor felt the weight of understanding settle on him. "How long?" "Until someone else comes back. Until someone else chooses the burden over the freedom." Father Kessler handed him the cassock and collar. "Be kind when you listen. Be fair when you judge. And remember that everyone carries something they can barely stand." Trevor put on the clothes. They fit perfectly. And as he did, Father Kessler faded, his form becoming translucent, and then disappearing entirely, like morning mist burned away by the sun. Trevor stood alone on Highway 11, wearing the black cassock of a priest he would never be. He climbed back into his truck and drove north, knowing he would drive this highway forever, waiting for someone to pick him up, waiting for the next person who needed to confess. He's still out there. Drivers on Highway 11 sometimes report seeing a hitchhiker in a priest's collar, standing by the roadside in the dead of night. Most drive past, but some stop. And those who stop find themselves confessing things they've never told anyone. And when they're done, Father Trevor Sanderson gives them a choice: walk 40 kilometers by sunrise, or carry your sins forever. Most choose to walk. They always choose to walk. But Trevor keeps hoping that someday, someone will come back. Story 4. The Tenant in Apartment 7B. Simone Trudeau loved her apartment building in Montreal's Plateau neighborhood. The 3-story walk-up on Rue Saint-Denis had been built in 1912, and it retained its original charm. Hardwood floors, crown molding, and large windows that let in the afternoon sun. Simone had lived in apartment 5B for 6 years, and she knew all her neighbors by name. Except for the tenant in apartment 7B. The top-floor apartment had been empty since Simone moved in. She'd asked the landlord about it once, and Madame Bélanger had given her a strange look. "It's not available," she'd said, and refused to discuss it further. But in March of 2003, someone moved into 7B. Simone first noticed when she heard footsteps above her bedroom at night. Not walking, exactly. More like pacing. Back and forth, for hours at a time. She considered complaining, but decided against it. The building was old, sounds traveled. She could live with footsteps. Then she started hearing other noises, dragging sounds, as if someone was moving heavy furniture across the floor. Banging that shook her ceiling light fixture. And once, a long, low moan that made her skin crawl, After a week of this, Simone decided to introduce herself to the new tenant. Maybe if they were friendly, she could politely ask them to keep it down. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door of 7B. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. "Hello, I'm Simone, from downstairs. I wanted to welcome you to the building." The door opened. The woman standing in the doorway was perhaps 40, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a high-necked black dress that looked like it belonged in a Victorian photograph. Her skin was so pale it was almost translucent. "Yes." The woman's voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm Simone. I live in 5B, right below you. I wanted to say hello and welcome you to the building." "Thank you." The woman began to close the door. "Wait," Simone said. "I'm sorry, but the noise at night. Is there any way you could—" "I'll be quieter." The door shut firmly. Simone stood in the hallway, feeling dismissed and vaguely unsettled. She hadn't even gotten the woman's name. That night, the noises were louder than ever. The pacing, the dragging. And now something new. Crying. A woman's voice, sobbing inconsolably. Simone put in earplugs and tried to sleep. The next morning she ran into Jacques Fontaine, who lived in 6A on the 2nd floor. Jacques was elderly, a retired teacher who'd lived in the building for 30 years. "Jacques, do you know anything about the new tenant in 7B? Simone asked. Jacques' face went still. "Someone's moved in." "Yes, last week. A woman. But she's so noisy at night, and when I tried to talk to her, she was strange." Jacques gripped Simone's arm. "What did she look like?" Simone described the woman in the black dress. Jacques turned pale. "Mon Dieu, I need to speak with Madame Bélanger immediately." "Why? What's wrong?" But Jacques was already hurrying toward the landlord's apartment on the 1st floor. Curious and concerned, Simone followed. She arrived just as Jacques was knocking frantically on Madame Bélanger's door. The landlord answered, saw their faces, and sighed heavily. "She's back," Jacques said. It wasn't a question. Madame Bélanger nodded grimly. "Come in, both of you. I suppose it's time you knew the truth, Simone." They sat in Madame Bélanger's living room, and the landlord poured 3 glasses of brandy before beginning her story. "Apartment 7B has been in my family for 4 generations, she said. "It's been empty for most of that time. We rent it out occasionally, but it never ends well." "Why?" Simone asked. "Because it's already occupied. By Celeste Marchand." Jacques took a long drink of his brandy. "Tell her," he urged Madame Bélanger. The landlord continued. "Celeste Marchand lived in this building in 1923. She was a seamstress, a quiet woman who kept to herself. One winter she fell in love with a man named Laurent Dubois. He was a cad, a gambler, married to someone else. But Celeste didn't know that. She thought they would marry, start a life together. Laurent strung her along for months. He would visit her in the evenings, in apartment 7B. And then one night, Celeste told him she was pregnant. Laurent's response was to laugh. He told her he was already married, that he'd never intended to leave his wife, that Celeste had been nothing but an amusement. Celeste was devastated, ruined by the standards of that time. An unmarried woman carrying a child, with no prospects, no future. She hanged herself in her apartment that night. Laurent found her body when he came back the next evening, feeling guilty. He cut her down and called the authorities. But Celeste didn't leave. Her spirit remained in 7B, and every so often, perhaps once every decade or two, she manifests. She becomes visible, tangible, and she reenacts her final days over and over, the pacing, the crying, the eventual suicide. Simone felt cold. "And when she manifests, someone is living in the apartment?" "No," Madame Bélanger said. "When she manifests, she is living in the apartment. or her version of living. She doesn't seem to know she's dead. She goes through her routine, waiting for Laurent to visit, hoping he'll tell her he loves her, that everything will be all right. But he never comes, Jacques added, because he's been dead for 80 years. This has happened before? Simone asked. Madame Bélanger nodded. 3 times in my life, in 1961, when I was a child, in 1978, and in 1989. Each time she manifests for about 2 weeks. She becomes more and more distraught, and then we find her, hanging from the chandelier, and after we cut her down, she disappears for another decade or 2. That's horrible, Simone whispered. It is. But there's something you need to understand. During those 2 weeks, while she's manifest, Celeste is alive in every way that matters. She's solid, real. She eats food, she sleeps, she exists. And if you interact with her, if you talk to her, you risk becoming part of her loop. What does that mean? Jacques answered. In 1978, a man named Philippe Gérard tried to help her. He talked with her, tried to convince her that Laurent wasn't worth her grief, that she had value beyond some worthless man. He thought he was making progress. And then one night, Philippe didn't come home. His family searched for him. The police investigated. They never found a trace. But I saw him, Madame Bélanger said quietly. I saw him in the apartment with Celeste. He was sitting in a chair, watching her pace. His eyes were empty, vacant. He was trapped in her loop, experiencing her final days with her, over and over. When she finally hanged herself that cycle, Philippe disappeared too. Where is he now? Simone asked. I don't know. Maybe nowhere. Maybe he's trapped in whatever space Celeste occupies between manifestations. All I know is that we can't help her, and we shouldn't try. We wait out the 2 weeks, we find her body, we cut her down, and we seal the apartment until the next time. Simone went home that day, shaken. She wanted to leave, to move out immediately. But something stopped her. Maybe it was compassion for Celeste, or maybe it was morbid curiosity. She decided to stay through the 2 weeks. She heard Celeste every night. The pacing grew more frantic. The crying became wails of despair. And then, on the 13th night, Simone heard something new. A man's voice. It was muffled, but she could hear the tone. Cruel, mocking. And then Celeste's voice, pleading, begging. Simone covered her ears, but she couldn't block out the sounds of Celeste's heartbreak. On the 14th night, the building was silent. The next morning, Madame Bélanger knocked on every door. It's time, she told her tenants. Stay in your apartments. Don't come upstairs. But Simone couldn't help herself. She crept up the stairs and watched through the banister as Madame Bélanger and Jacques entered apartment 7B. She heard Madame Bélanger's gasp, heard Jacques' muttered prayer. They emerged carrying a rope. It's done, Madame Bélanger said. She's gone again. I want to see, Simone said. No, you don't. But Simone pushed past them into the apartment. It was empty, completely bare. No furniture, no belongings, just empty rooms with faded wallpaper and dusty floors. Except for one thing. In the center of the living room, there was a stain on the floor. Dark, old. The shape suggested something had lain there for a long time. Is that, Simone began. Where they found her body in 1923, Madame Bélanger confirmed. It's never faded, no matter how much we scrub, and it appears fresh every time she manifests. Simone looked up at the chandelier. She could imagine the rope, the body swaying gently. She'll come back, Simone said. It wasn't a question. Yes, in 10 years or 20. She always comes back. Simone moved out of the building 2 weeks later. She couldn't live beneath apartment 7B anymore. Couldn't bear knowing what happened there, what would happen there again. But sometimes, Late at night, in her new apartment across town, Simone thinks about Celeste Marchand. She thinks about a woman so devastated by betrayal that she couldn't move on, even in death. She thinks about the loop Celeste is trapped in, living and dying, forever waiting for a man who will never love her. And Simone wonders, if someone had just knocked on that door in 1923, if someone had heard Celeste crying and asked if she needed help, could it all have been different? But that's the thing about horror. It's often just tragedy that went unnoticed until it was too late. Apartment 7B sits empty now. Madame Bélanger died in 2015, and the building was sold. The new owners don't know its history. They're renovating, planning to rent out all the apartments, including 7B. Simone wonders what will happen when someone moves in, unsuspecting, and hears the pacing above them. Will they knock on the door? Will they try to help? Or will they become part of the loop, trapped forever in Celeste's final days? Story 5. The Memory Eater of Clearwater Cove. Dr. Iris Pemberton opened her practice in Clearwater Cove, British Columbia, in the spring of 2006. As a psychologist specializing in trauma and memory, she was excited to serve a small coastal community that had limited access to mental health services. The town was beautiful, nestled between mountains and the Pacific Ocean, with a population of just under 3,000. Everyone knew everyone, which Iris found charming at first. But she quickly learned that small towns keep secrets better than cities do. Her first unusual patient was a woman named Fiona Garrett, a 53-year-old librarian who came in complaining of memory loss. "It's not like dementia," Fiona explained. "I'm not forgetting recent things or getting confused. It's specific memories that are gone. My 10th birthday, my wedding day, the day my daughter was born. Important moments just vanished." Iris ran through the standard questions. Head injuries? Substance abuse? Family history of neurological conditions? Fiona's answers were all negative. "When did you first notice these missing memories?" Iris asked. "About 6 months ago. I was looking through old photo albums with my daughter, and she was talking about her birth. I smiled and nodded, but I realized I couldn't actually remember it. Not a single detail. It terrified me." Over the following weeks, Iris saw 4 more patients with similar complaints. A retired fisherman missing memories of his military service. A schoolteacher who couldn't remember her childhood. A young man who'd lost all memories of his deceased father. Iris was baffled. Memory loss of this nature, selective, targeting emotionally significant events, didn't fit any condition she'd studied. She consulted with colleagues, sent patients for neurological workups. Everything came back normal. Then she met Desmond Corver. Desmond was 16, brought in by his frantic mother. "He's not himself," she said. "He used to be so bright, so engaged. Now he just sits in his room, staring at nothing. And he says he doesn't remember anything before last week." Iris interviewed Desmond privately. He was a handsome kid with empty eyes. "I remember waking up in my bedroom 7 days ago," he said. "Everything before that is blank. My mom shows me pictures, tells me stories about my life, but none of it feels real. It's like I'm an actor who forgot his lines, and everyone's trying to remind me of my character." "Do you remember any feelings?" Iris asked. "Even if you can't remember events, do you remember being happy, sad, afraid?" Desmond thought for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "I don't remember feeling anything." That night, Iris couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her patients, about the pattern of memory loss, and she remembered something odd. All of them had mentioned experiencing vivid dreams in the weeks before their memories disappeared. She started keeping detailed notes on the dreams. Fiona Garrett had dreamed of a woman in a white dress standing at the edge of the ocean. The retired fisherman had dreamed of the same woman standing at the end of a pier. The schoolteacher, the same woman standing in her childhood bedroom. And Desmond had dreamed of the woman every night for a month before his memories vanished entirely. "She just stands there," he told Iris, "watching me. And I feel like she's hungry." Iris decided to investigate the town's history. She spent an afternoon in the library, Fiona's library, reading old newspapers and local histories. She found an obituary from 1973. Evangeline Corver, age 32, died by suicide on October 15th. She is survived by her husband, Marcus, and son, Desmond. The name caught her attention. Desmond. Her patient's name was Desmond Corver, and his father was Marcus Corver, which would make Marcus about 70 now. She looked up the address and found that the Corver family still lived in the same house. Iris kept reading. Evangeline Corver had been a troubled woman, by all accounts. She'd suffered from severe depression following the death of her infant daughter. Multiple suicide attempts preceded her eventual success. But what struck Iris was a quote from a friend, printed in a memorial piece. Evangeline used to say she was disappearing, not dying, but fading away. She said her memories were leaving her, and without them, she didn't know who she was. By the end, I don't think she remembered any of us at all. Iris felt cold. The memory loss. The dreams of a woman in white. And now this. Evangeline Corver, who lost her memories and then her life. She needed to talk to Marcus Corver. She found him at home, a frail, elderly man who looked older than his years. When Iris introduced herself as Desmond's psychologist, his face crumpled. "I should have moved us away from here," he said. "I should have left after Evangeline. But this was our home, and I thought maybe it was over. Mr. Corver, I need you to tell me what happened to your wife." Marcus invited her in. The house was dark, curtains drawn. Photos covered every surface, as if Marcus surrounded himself with images to fight against forgetting. "Evangeline started losing her memories about a year before she died," Marcus said. "At first we thought it was depression affecting her cognition. But it was more than that. Specific memories would disappear. Our first date, our wedding, the birth of our son, and the more memories she lost, the more she faded. Not physically, but spiritually. She became hollow." "Did she have dreams?" Marcus looked at Iris sharply. "How did you know?" "Other patients have reported dreams of a woman in white." "Yes, Evangeline dreamed of a woman too, but she said it wasn't just any woman. She said it was herself, or some version of herself. Her future self, she called it. The thing she would become if she lost everything that made her who she was." "I don't understand." Marcus stood and walked to the window. "When Evangeline was a girl, her grandmother told her a story. A local legend about a woman who drowned herself in Clearwater Cove back in the 1800s. This woman had lost everything. Her family, her home, her memories of better times. And in her despair, she became something else. Something that feeds on memories, on the emotional significance that gives our lives meaning." "That's just a story," Iris said. "Is it?" Evangeline believed it. She believed that when you lose enough of yourself, enough of your memories and identity, you become like that drowned woman. You become a memory eater, and you spend eternity feeding on others, stealing their memories to try to fill the void where yours used to be. "Mr. Corver, she killed herself to stop it. She knew she was becoming one of them. She wrote me a note. I'd rather die as myself than live as a thief of souls." I found her body on the shore, right where the original woman supposedly drowned. Iris didn't know what to say. The story was absurd, the stuff of folklore and superstition. But her patients were real. Their missing memories were real. "Is there a way to stop it?" she asked. Marcus laughed bitterly. "If there is, I never found it." All I could do was watch as more people in this town slowly forgot who they were. It happens in waves, every few years. Evangeline was part of one wave. Now it's happening again. That night, Iris had the dream. A woman in a white dress stood at the foot of her bed. The woman's face was blurred, indistinct, but Iris could feel her presence like a weight on her chest. The woman watched her silently, and Iris felt something reaching into her mind, sifting through her memories like someone browsing through books on a shelf. She woke, gasping, her heart racing. Over the next week, Iris had the dream every night, and each morning she woke with the feeling that something was missing, though she couldn't identify what. On the 8th night, she understood. She was looking at a photograph of her father when she realized she couldn't remember his voice. She could remember conversations, remember being with him, but the sound of his voice was gone. And with it, a piece of her connection to him had vanished. Iris was terrified. She was becoming like her patients. The memory eater was feeding on her. Desperate, she returned to the library and dug deeper into the town's history. She found records of similar waves of memory loss in 1936, in 1957, in 1984. Each time, clusters of people reported missing memories and dreams of a woman in white. And each time, one person had disappeared entirely. In 1936, a young woman named Sarah Chen. In 1957, a man named Robert Finley. In 1984, Patricia Morse. All three had been found dead on the shore of Clearwater Cove, apparent suicides, just like Evangeline Corver. Iris understood then. The memory eater wasn't just stealing memories. It was consuming entire people, one at a time. It fed on many, but it claimed one completely, and that person became the next memory eater, trapped in an endless cycle of hunger and theft. She had to stop it. But how do you fight something that exists in dreams and feeds on the intangible? Iris decided to confront it directly. That night, she took sleeping pills to ensure she would dream deeply. She lay in bed and waited. The woman in white appeared. Up close, Iris could see her face clearly now. It was Evangeline Corver, but wrong. Her features were too sharp, her eyes too empty. This was what Evangeline had become. "You're stealing from us," Iris said in the dream. "Our memories, our identities. Why?" Evangeline's mouth opened, and when she spoke, her voice was the sound of waves on shore, of water drowning all other sounds. "I am so empty. I have nothing left. I need to remember what it was like to be whole." "But you're destroying people." "I know, I don't want to. But the hunger, you can't imagine the hunger. Every memory I take fills me for a moment, and then it's gone, and I'm empty again." Iris felt tears on her face. "There has to be a way to stop this." "There is." Evangeline reached out, and her hand was cold, so cold. "Someone has to take my place. Someone has to willingly become the memory eater. Then I can rest. And if no one agrees, then I will keep feeding until someone is consumed completely, and they will become the next one. That's how it's always been." Iris thought of Desmond Corver, sitting in his room with no memories, no sense of self. She thought of all her patients losing pieces of themselves. "What if I agreed?" Iris heard herself say. "What if I took your place willingly? Would you stop feeding on the others? Would you return their memories?" Evangeline stared at her. "You would do that?" "If it saves them, yes. The memories are already gone. I've consumed them. They can't be returned. But I would stop taking more. I would rest. And you would become like me, hungry and empty, feeding on memories for the rest of eternity." Iris closed her eyes. Could she sacrifice herself? Could she become a monster to save her patients, her community? "There's another way," a voice said. Iris opened her eyes. Another figure had appeared in the dream. Marcus Corver, but not the frail old man she'd spoken to. This Marcus was younger, perhaps 40, the age he'd been when his wife died. "Marcus?" Iris asked. "I'm here," he said. "I've been coming into her dreams for years, trying to reach her, trying to remind her of who she was." "How are you?" "I'm dying," Marcus said simply. "Cancer. I have perhaps 2 weeks left, and I've spent them preparing for this moment. I've been taking the same medication you took tonight, ensuring I dream deeply, and I've been calling out to her, to Evangeline, to what she's become." He turned to the woman in white. "I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm ready to join you now. Not as another memory eater, but as myself. If you take me completely, consume me entirely, I'll fill that emptiness inside you. My memories, my love, everything I am. It will be enough." "Marcus, no," Evangeline whispered. "I'm dying anyway, darling. Let me do this. Let me save you. Save this town. Take me, and rest." Iris watched as Marcus stepped forward and embraced Evangeline. For a moment they were just a couple, holding each other. And then Marcus began to fade, his form dissolving into light that flowed into Evangeline. The woman in white gasped. Her features softened, became more human. And as Marcus disappeared entirely, Evangeline began to cry. "I remember," she sobbed. "I remember everything. Our life, our love, our son. Marcus, I remember." And then she too began to fade, becoming translucent, peaceful. "Thank you," she said to Iris. "Thank you for trying to save me. But he already did." Evangeline vanished. Iris woke in her bed, the morning sun streaming through her window. She felt different, complete. And when she thought of her father, she could hear his voice clearly, every beloved inflection. Over the following weeks, Iris's patients began to improve. They didn't regain their lost memories, those were gone forever, but they stopped losing new ones. The dreams of the woman in white ceased. And when Iris went to check on Desmond Corver, she found the young man laughing with his mother, telling her about school. He still didn't remember his past, but he was building new memories, new connections. He was alive in a way he hadn't been before. Marcus Corver died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks after Iris's dream. At his funeral, Iris stood at the back, watching as the town said goodbye to a man who had saved them all without their knowledge. She never told anyone what had happened. Who would believe her? But she thinks about Marcus and Evangeline sometimes, and she hopes they're together now, whole and at peace, in whatever place comes after this one. Clearwater Cove has had no reports of memory loss since 2006. The legend of the drowned woman has faded into obscurity, just another old story no one quite remembers the details of. But Iris remembers. She remembers everything, and she's grateful for every memory she has, knowing now how precious they are and how easily they can be lost. Story 6. The Caller from Station 54. Dispatch operator Angela Wu had worked the overnight shift at Edmonton's 911 call center for 8 years. She'd heard everything: heart attacks, assaults, fires, car accidents. She prided herself on staying calm, on being the voice of reassurance when people were experiencing the worst moments of their lives. But nothing prepared her for the call from Station 54. It came in at 2:47 a.m. on a freezing January night in 2010. 911. What's your emergency? I need help. The voice was male, young, terrified. Please, I need help. Something's wrong at the station. Okay, sir, I need you to stay calm. What station are you referring to? Station 54, the fire station. I'm Lieutenant Reuben Schaefer. We need help immediately. Angela pulled up the information. Station 54 was a small rural fire station about 40 kilometers outside Edmonton. It housed a volunteer crew of 6 firefighters. Lieutenant Schaefer, What's the nature of your emergency? They're not breathing. None of them are breathing. I came back from a call and they're all just lying there. I think it's carbon monoxide. Please send help. Angela's training kicked in immediately. I'm dispatching units now. Lieutenant, I need you to get yourself outside immediately. If it's carbon monoxide, you're in danger. I can't leave them. I have to help them. Lieutenant Schaefer, you can't help them if you're unconscious. I need you to exit the building now. How many victims? 5. 5 of my crew. Please hurry. Angela dispatched emergency services and stayed on the line with Reuben Schaefer as he stumbled outside into the cold night. She could hear his ragged breathing, his panic. They're coming, Lieutenant. Help is coming. Stay with me. But something bothered her. She pulled up the dispatch records for Station 54. According to the system, all of Station 54's crew was currently on scene at a structure fire 15 kilometers away, including Lieutenant Reuben Schaefer. Lieutenant, I need to verify some information. You said you came back from a call? Yes. House fire on Township Road 542. We just cleared the scene. And the rest of your crew? They're here, at the station. His voice broke. I think they're dead. Oh God, I think they're all dead. Angela's supervisor, Kenneth Bryce, came over. She muted the call and explained the situation. That's impossible, Kenneth said. I'm looking at the same records. The entire crew from Station 54, including a Lieutenant Schaefer, is currently at the Township Road fire. They've been there for 45 minutes. Angela unmuted. Lieutenant Schaefer, I'm showing in my system that you and your crew are at a fire on Township Road 542. Can you explain that? Silence on the line. Lieutenant? That's where I was, where we all were. But I came back. I came back to the station. Why did you come back? Reuben Schaefer sounded confused. I don't remember. I had to come back. Kenneth grabbed another phone and called the incident commander at the Township Road fire. Angela watched his face change as he listened. All 6 crew members from Station 54 are accounted for at this location, the incident commander reported, including Lieutenant Schaefer. I'm looking at him right now. What's this about? Kenneth hung up and looked at Angela. There's someone at Station 54 claiming to be Reuben Schaefer, but the real Reuben Schaefer is 15 kilometers away. Angela felt her skin crawl. Who am I talking to? She unmuted the call. Lieutenant, emergency services are almost there. I need you to describe yourself to me. What? Why? Please, sir, it's procedure. Describe yourself. I'm 32. Brown hair, 6 feet tall. I'm wearing my turnout gear. Why are you asking me this? Angela pulled up Reuben Schaefer's profile. The description matched. The first emergency units arrived at Station 54. Angela listened on the radio as they entered the building. Dispatch, we have 5 victims inside, all deceased. They're in full turnout gear, positioned as if they were getting ready to respond to a call. Any sign of the caller? Negative. Building appears empty except for the victims. Angela's heart raced. Lieutenant Schaefer, units are on scene. Where are you? I'm outside, in front of the station. Where are they? I can't see anyone. Lieutenant, walk toward the responding units. Wave your arms so they can see you. I am. I'm waving. Why aren't they seeing me? The radio crackled. Dispatch, we've done a complete perimeter check. No one outside the building. No sign of the caller. Angela made a decision. Lieutenant, I'm going to stay on the line with you. But I need you to answer a question honestly. Do you remember everything from tonight? From the beginning of your shift? A long pause. Yes. We responded to the structure fire. It was a big one. Old farmhouse, fully involved when we arrived. And then what happened? We fought the fire. We got it under control, and then... His voice trailed off. Lieutenant? I don't remember coming back to the station. I was at the fire, and then I was just here, at the station. Finding them. Angela took a breath. Lieutenant Schaefer, I need you to tell me something. Did anyone get hurt at the fire? Did anything happen to you? Silence. Lieutenant? The roof collapsed. His voice was barely a whisper. Part of the roof collapsed. I was inside doing a secondary search. It came down so fast. Angela closed her eyes. Lieutenant, I'm going to ask you to do something. I want you to look down at yourself. Really look. Why? What are you? Please, just look. A sound came through the phone. Not quite a gasp. Not quite a scream. Just a broken exhalation of understanding. Oh, Reuben Schaefer said. Oh, I see now. What do you see? I'm burned. My gear is melted to my skin. I can see bone on my hands. How did I not notice? How did I... He started to hyperventilate. Am I dead? Am I dead? Angela felt tears on her cheeks. I don't know. But I'm here with you. You're not alone. Kenneth was on another phone, getting updates from the Township Road fire. He looked at Angela and nodded grimly. The roof had collapsed 40 minutes ago. Lieutenant Reuben Schaefer had been caught in the collapse. He was dead before they could pull him out. Lieutenant, Angela said gently, I think you need to let go now. I don't understand. Let go of what? Of the station. Of your crew. Of whatever pulled you back there. They're gone. You tried to save them, but they're gone. But I'm talking to you. I'm here. Are you? Really think about it. Are you really there? The line was quiet for a long time. When Reuben spoke again, his voice was different, calmer, distant. I was so scared. When the roof came down, I was so scared. I didn't want to be alone. I know, but you don't have to be scared anymore. My wife, Dahlia, she's pregnant, our first baby. How will she... She'll be okay. She'll remember you as a hero, because that's what you are. I tried to save them, at the station. I tried. I know you did. You always tried. That's who you are. I'm tired. Then rest. It's okay to rest now. Will you stay with me? Until I... Yes, I'll stay with you. Angela sat at her console, holding the phone, talking softly to a dead man. She told him about her own family, about her dog, about the sunrise she'd seen that morning. She told him anything and everything, filling the silence, giving him a voice to anchor to. Kenneth brought her coffee. Other operators gathered around, listening, understanding that something profound was happening. At 4:23 a.m., the line went dead. Not disconnected. Just silent. The call was still connected, but no one was on the other end anymore. Angela finally hung up. She sat for a moment, processing what had happened, then went to the bathroom and cried. The incident report was filed as deceased caller, disoriented before death. The official story was that Lieutenant Schaefer had survived long enough after the collapse to make the 911 call before succumbing to his injuries. It didn't explain how he described his dead crew at a station 15 kilometers away, or how he stayed on the line for 90 minutes after his time of death. But dispatch operators don't always need explanations. They know that their job exists in liminal spaces, in moments between life and death, in the urgent present where past and future don't always matter. Angela Wu continued working overnight shifts. She took hundreds more calls, saved many more lives. But she never forgot the caller from Station 54, the man who was so afraid of being alone that he refused to die until someone promised to stay with him. Station 54 was eventually closed and demolished. The deaths of the 5 firefighters were attributed to a faulty heating system that produced carbon monoxide. The official investigation concluded that they had all been asleep in their bunks when they were overcome. But Angela knows the truth. They were getting ready to respond to a call. They were preparing to help someone in need. And even in death, their lieutenant tried to save them, tried to call for help, tried to do the job he'd sworn to do. Sometimes late at night, when Angela's console is quiet, her phone will ring. The caller ID shows Station 54. She used to answer these calls, but there's never anyone on the line. Just silence and the soft sound of breathing. She doesn't answer anymore. She knows Ruben Schaefer isn't calling for help now. He's just checking in, making sure she's okay, making sure someone is there. Once a firefighter, always a firefighter, even after the final alarm. Story 7. The Preservation Room. In 2001, archivist Gillian Rosewood accepted a position at the National Archives facility in Ottawa. The job was perfect: cataloging and preserving historical documents in climate-controlled rooms, minimal human interaction, and the quiet satisfaction of protecting Canada's history. Her supervisor, Maurice Dufresne, showed her around on her first day. The facility was vast, mostly underground, with miles of shelving containing everything from colonial-era land grants to diplomatic correspondence. "One rule," Maurice said as they walked. "Never enter Preservation Room C alone. Always go with a partner, and never stay longer than 30 minutes. "Why?" Maurice hesitated. "The documents in that room are problematic. They require special handling. You'll understand when you're assigned there." For her first 6 months, Gillian worked in other sections. She cataloged immigration records, filed military documents, and carefully restored water-damaged letters from the 1800s. She loved the work, the tangible connection to the past. Then Maurice assigned her to Preservation Room C. "You'll be working with Tobias Klein," Maurice said. "He's been handling Room C for 5 years. Follow his lead exactly." Tobias was a thin man in his 40s with haunted eyes. When Gillian met him outside Room C, he was wearing a watch with multiple alarms set. "The 30-minute rule is critical," he said without preamble. "I set alarms every 10 minutes as reminders. When the third alarm goes off, we leave immediately, no matter what we're doing." "What's so dangerous about old documents?" Tobias unlocked the heavy door. "You'll see." Preservation Room C looked like any other archive room. Rows of metal shelving, acid-free boxes, temperature and humidity monitors. But Gillian immediately felt wrong. The air was too still, too heavy, and it was absolutely silent in a way that felt unnatural. "What's in here?" she asked. "Personal effects and writings from people who died violently or traumatically," Tobias explained. "Suicide notes, murder victims' journals, letters written by soldiers who died in battle. The archival policy is to preserve them for historical research, but storing them together creates problems." "What kind of problems?" Tobias pulled a box from a shelf. "This contains the diary of Paulina Whitmore, a woman who killed her 3 children and then herself in 1967. She wrote her final entry describing what she planned to do. When you read it, you can feel her desperation, her madness. And if you read too much, if you spend too long with these documents, that feeling doesn't go away when you leave." Gillian thought he was exaggerating until she started working. The documents in Room C were heartbreaking. A letter from a soldier named Graham Wickham, written hours before he was killed at Vimy Ridge, telling his wife he knew he wouldn't survive the next battle. A teenager's diary chronicling his descent into depression, ending 3 days before his suicide. A woman's testimony about her assault, written in a shaking hand, never read by the jury who acquitted her attacker. Each document carried weight, carried pain. And Gillian found herself absorbing it, feeling the anguish of people long dead. After her first session in Room C, she went home and cried for 2 hours without knowing why. "It gets easier," Tobias lied. "You learn to maintain distance." But it didn't get easier. Gillian started having nightmares. She would dream she was reading documents that described her own death in vivid detail. She would wake up gasping, certain she'd seen the date and manner of her end written in careful handwriting on yellowed paper. One day, she and Tobias were cataloging a collection of letters from a psychiatric institution that had closed in 1974. The letters were from patients to family members, most of them never sent. As Jillian read them, she noticed something odd. "Tobias, these letters mention someone named the Witness." He looked up sharply. "Show me." They spread out the letters. Different patients, different years, but the same reference appeared in dozens of documents. "The Witness stands at the foot of my bed each night. I told the Witness my secrets, and now I can't stop telling them. The Witness is writing everything down, every terrible thing I've done. How do I make the Witness leave?" Tobias's face had gone pale. "We need to log these and get out, now. But we still have 15 minutes. Now, Jillian." They logged the collection and left. Outside room C, Tobias leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "What was that about?" Jillian asked. "The Witness. It's mentioned in documents across different time periods, different locations, always in writings from people experiencing extreme psychological distress. Maurice thinks it's a shared delusion, a manifestation of guilt or trauma. But I think it's something else." "What?" "I think all this pain, all this trauma stored in that room, has created something, an entity that feeds on suffering. And the more time we spend with these documents, the more it can see us, the more we become visible to it." Jillian wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as paranoia, but she remembered the feeling in room C, the sense of being observed. That night, she saw the Witness for the first time. She woke at 3 a.m. to find a figure standing at the foot of her bed. It was humanoid, but indistinct, as if made of shadow and smoke. It held something that might have been a pen and paper. Jillian couldn't move, couldn't scream. The Witness watched her silently, and she felt it cataloging her, recording her fears and secrets with the same clinical precision she used on the documents in room C. Then it faded away. In the morning, Jillian convinced herself it had been a nightmare. But at work she found Tobias waiting for her outside room C, looking worse than she'd ever seen him. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you—" "Because I see it every night. Have for 3 years. Ever since I spent too long with the Whitmore diary, trying to understand why she killed her children. I read that document for hours, absorbing every detail of her madness. And now the Witness comes to me, recording my every moment of doubt, every dark thought, every time I've failed someone I loved. We have to tell Maurice." "Maurice knows. He saw it too, back when he worked in room C. That's why he got promoted out. That's why he warns everyone. But the documents have to be preserved. That's the law. So someone has to work in that room, and someone has to risk becoming visible to the Witness." Jillian wanted to quit. But she thought about the documents, about the voices of the dead preserved on paper. Someone had to care for them, even if they carried poison. She continued working in room C, always with a partner, always watching the clock. And each night, the Witness came to her bedroom and recorded her suffering in its endless ledger. Months passed. Jillian grew thinner, more withdrawn. Her friends stopped calling because she never answered. Her parents worried, but she assured them she was fine, just busy with work. Then one day, she found a document that wasn't in the catalog. It was a journal, leather-bound, sitting on a shelf where she'd placed an empty box the day before. The name on the label read, Jillian Rosewood. With shaking hands, she opened it. The pages were filled with entries written in her own handwriting. But she had never written these words. They described her life in meticulous detail, her childhood, her education, her hopes and fears, and they continued into the future, describing events that hadn't happened yet. The entries grew darker as they progressed. They described her increasing isolation, her nightmares, her growing obsession with the witness. They described how she would eventually stay in room C past the 30-minute limit, how she would keep reading documents even as Tobias begged her to leave. The final entry described her death. She would be found in room C, slumped over a table, surrounded by documents. The cause of death would be listed as cardiac arrest. But the truth was simpler. She had become so visible to the witness that she became part of its collection. Another tragic story to be preserved and filed away. The date of her death was written at the top of the page. November 14th, 2002, 3 weeks away. Gillian showed the journal to Tobias. He read it with growing horror. "This is what happens," he said. "The witness doesn't just record our suffering, it creates it. It writes our stories toward their worst possible endings. I found my own journal 2 years ago. It predicted I would harm my daughter during one of my episodes of despair. I haven't seen her since. I can't risk it. How do we stop it? I don't know if we can. Maurice tried. He burned his journal, quit working in room C, moved to a different city. But the witness followed him. It kept writing. Eventually he came back and accepted his role. Better to contain it here than let it spread." Gillian couldn't accept that. She spent every free moment researching the witness, reading every reference in the documents. She learned that it appeared throughout history, always connected to places where trauma was concentrated. Battlefields, hospitals, prisons, archives. It was a parasite that fed on pain, and it sustained itself by creating more pain, by writing people toward their worst destinies. But she also found something else. A letter from a nun named Sister Teresa, written in 1889. Sister Teresa had worked in an asylum and had encountered the witness. She wrote, "The demon that records our sins grows strong on our belief in our own damnation. It writes terrible futures because we expect terrible futures. But I have learned that the pen can be taken from its hand. We must write our own stories with such conviction that the demon's version fades to nothing." Gillian understood. The witness had power because people who saw it were already broken, already expecting the worst. It simply gave form to their fears. She made a decision. She went to Preservation Room C alone, violating the first rule. She found her journal and sat down with a pen. The witness appeared almost immediately, solidifying in the corner of the room. It was more distinct now that she was alone with it. Tall, thin, with too many joints in its arms. Its face was a blank page. Gillian began to write in her journal, crossing out the witness's entries and replacing them with her own. November 14th, 2002. I quit my job at the archives. I move to British Columbia and start a new life. I find peace. December 2002. I begin volunteering with a crisis helpline. I use my experience with trauma to help others. January 2003. I meet someone kind. We build a life together. We are happy. The witness moved closer, its hand reaching out to stop her. But Gillian kept writing, filling page after page with a different story, a better story. She wrote with absolute conviction, refusing to accept the ending it had prescribed. The witness's form began to flicker. Its blank face showed something like confusion, or perhaps rage. Gillian wrote faster. She wrote herself a future of healing, of connection, of meaning. She wrote herself alive. With a sound like tearing paper, the witness disappeared. Gillian sat in the silent room, her hand cramping, her journal filled with her own handwriting. She didn't know if it had worked. She didn't know if she'd defeated the witness, or just bought herself time. But on November 14th, 2002, Gillian Rosewood walked out of the National Archives and never came back. She moved to Victoria, British Columbia. She started volunteering with a crisis helpline. And eventually, she met a kind person and built a life with them. Tobias Klein found his own journal one day with new entries, written in Jillian's hand. You will see your daughter again. You will heal. You are not your worst thoughts. You are the love you choose to give. He wept when he read it, and slowly, carefully, he began to believe it might be true. The witness still exists. It still appears to those who work too long with trauma, who absorb too much pain. But now there are other journals in Preservation Room C, written by people who refused its narrative. Stories of survival, of healing, of chosen futures instead of fated ones. And sometimes, late at night, archivists working in Room C see a figure in the corner. But instead of recording their suffering, it seems to be reading, learning about different endings than the ones it knows how to write. Maybe demons can be taught new stories. Maybe we all can. Story 8. The Ice Fisherman's Broadcast. In February 2008, radio host Preston Mallory was driving across frozen Lake Winnipeg when his car broke down. It was 11 p.m., 20 degrees below zero, and he was miles from shore. Preston's cell phone had no signal. His radio station's emergency beacon wasn't responding. He was going to freeze to death unless someone found him. Preston decided to walk toward the distant lights of a fishing village, but the ice was treacherous, covered with pressure ridges and hidden cracks. After 20 minutes of stumbling through the darkness, he saw a light ahead, an ice fishing shack. Preston approached and knocked on the door. Hello? I need help. The door opened, revealing a man in his 60s wearing heavy winter gear. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp. Come in, the man said. You look half frozen. Inside, the shack was warm, heated by a small propane stove. A hole in the ice showed dark water beneath. Fishing gear hung on the walls, and a shortwave radio crackled with static in the corner. Thank you, Preston said. My car broke down. I need to call for help. No cell signal out here, the man said. Name's Victor Chernoff. Sit down, warm yourself. I'll radio the shore. Victor adjusted the shortwave radio, trying different frequencies. All Preston heard was static, occasionally broken by fragments of voices speaking in languages he didn't recognize. Interference tonight, Victor muttered. Happens sometimes. Preston noticed photographs tacked to the shack's walls. They showed Victor over the years, always ice fishing, always alone. In the oldest photos, he looked perhaps 30. The newest showed him as he appeared now. You've been coming out here a long time, Preston said. 53 years, every winter. This lake is in my blood. Do you ever catch anything? Victor smiled strangely. Not fish. I'm fishing for something else. Before Preston could ask what that meant, the radio suddenly came to life. But instead of a rescue operator, a voice emerged from the static. A woman's voice, speaking English with a heavy accent. Victor, can you hear me? It's Anya. I'm so cold. Please help me. Victor's face went white. He grabbed the radio. Anya, where are you? I'm under the ice. I've been under the ice for so long. Please, Victor, you promised you'd always find me. Preston felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Who is that? Victor didn't answer. He was staring at the hole in the ice, where something pale had appeared in the dark water. A face, looking up at them. A woman's face, preserved impossibly in the freezing water. Anya, Victor whispered. The face mouthed words, and they came through the radio. You left me here. Preston stood, backing toward the door. What is this? What's happening? Victor finally looked at him, tears freezing on his cheeks. Anya Petrova, we were engaged. This was 1955. We came out ice fishing together, just the two of us. She wanted to check the ice thickness near a pressure ridge. I told her not to, but she didn't listen. The ice broke. She fell through. Did she drown? I don't know. I tried to pull her out, but the current took her under the ice. I could see her through the ice, trying to get back to the hole, but she kept drifting further away. I ran for help, but by the time we came back, Victor's voice broke. We never found her body. The lake kept her. The radio crackled again, and now there were multiple voices, all speaking at once. Men, women, children, all of them calling out from beneath the ice. Help me, I'm trapped. Why didn't anyone come? It's so dark. Down here. I can't find the surface. Preston realized these were all people who had died in Lake Winnipeg, whose bodies were never recovered. The lake covered over 24,000 square kilometers. Hundreds of people had drowned in it over the centuries. And somehow, Victor's radio was picking up their voices. This is impossible, Preston said. I've been hearing them for 53 years, Victor replied. Ever since Anya died. Every time I come out on the ice, I hear them. At first, I thought I was going crazy. But then I realized the radio actually picks up their voices when the conditions are right. When the ice is thick enough, when the electromagnetic interference from the aurora is strong enough, the lake becomes conductive. It transmits the voices of everyone it's taken. Why do you keep coming back? Because Anya calls to me. Every winter she calls. And I keep thinking that if I can just find the right frequency, the right combination of conditions, I can bring her back. I can pull her up through the ice. Preston looked at the hole in the ice, where more faces had appeared. Dozens of them, pressing against the underside of the ice, looking up at the warm light of the shack. Victor, they're dead. You can't bring them back. I know that. Logically, I know. But when I hear her voice... Victor turned up the radio volume. Anya's voice became clearer. Victor, I'm so close. I can see the light of your shack. If you lower the line, if you pull me up, I can come back. We can finally be together. Victor grabbed his fishing line, the one that dangled through the hole. I have to try. Don't, Preston said. Please, this isn't right. But Victor was lowering the line into the water, feeding it down into the darkness. Anya, I'm sending down the line. Can you reach it? Yes, I have it. Pull me up, my love. Pull me up. Victor began hauling on the line. It resisted, heavy with something more than water. Preston watched in horror as the line came up, hand over hand, bringing something with it. A pale hand broke the surface of the water. Preston ran for the door, but Victor shouted at him. Help me! I can't pull her up alone! Against his better judgment, Preston grabbed the line. Together they pulled, and more of Anya emerged from the hole. Her head, her shoulders, her torso. She was wearing the same winter coat from the photograph, still looking exactly as she had in 1955, preserved by the freezing water. But something was wrong. Her eyes were empty. Her skin was too white. And as they pulled her further out, Preston saw that other hands were grasping her legs, other bodies clinging to her, all of them trying to climb up through the hole. Stop, Preston shouted. We have to stop. But Victor kept pulling, desperate to bring Anya all the way out. The hole in the ice was widening, cracking. The faces beneath the ice were pushing up, trying to break through. Preston let go of the line and stumbled backward. The ice beneath his feet groaned ominously. Anya's upper body was now fully out of the water, lying on the ice. Victor knelt beside her, sobbing, trying to warm her frozen face with his hands. Anya, please come back to me. Anya's mouth opened. Water poured out, and with it, words. Come with me, Victor. Come down where it's quiet, where we can be together forever. Her frozen hands grabbed Victor's wrists. He tried to pull away, but her grip was impossibly strong. She began dragging him toward the hole. No, Anya, no! Preston grabbed Victor, trying to pull him back, but more hands emerged from the hole, grabbing at Victor's legs, his coat, pulling him down. Let go, Preston shouted at the dead woman. Let him go. But Anya smiled, her blue lips spreading to show teeth. "He's been mine for 53 years. He's been fishing for me all this time. Now he's caught me, and I'm keeping him." Victor was pulled into the hole. His screams were cut off as the water closed over his head. Preston saw him sinking into the darkness, surrounded by the pale forms of the drowned, Anya's arms wrapped around him in a lover's embrace. The hole froze over instantly, the ice sealing itself as if it had never been broken. Preston ran. He ran across the ice, away from the shack, away from the radio that still crackled with voices. He ran until he saw lights, until he reached the fishing village and pounded on the first door he found. The authorities searched for Victor Chernoff and found his ice fishing shack, still warm, the radio still on. But Victor was gone. No hole in the ice, no sign of struggle. Just an empty shack and a radio picking up voices in the static. Preston tried to explain what he'd seen, but no one believed him. They assumed Victor had suffered a stroke or heart attack and wandered off into the night, falling through the ice somewhere. Lake Winnipeg never gave up Victor's body. Preston Mallory quit his radio job after that. He couldn't stand the sound of static, couldn't bear the thought of voices coming through the darkness. He moved south, as far from frozen lakes as he could get. But sometimes, when he can't sleep, he'll scan through AM radio frequencies late at night. And occasionally, he'll hear them. The voices of people under the ice, calling out for help, calling out for their loved ones. And sometimes, he hears Victor's voice, calling to his Anya, finally together in the cold, dark water of Lake Winnipeg. Finally together, forever. The ice fishing shack is still out there. Local fishermen report seeing its light on winter nights, though no one admits to using it. And those who get too close report hearing voices on the wind, voices that sound like they're coming from beneath their feet. The lake remembers everyone it takes, and sometimes it calls them back for a visit.